Hey, welcome everyone. This is Barry Rook from the Cider Crate. Thanks for joining us for our podcast video series. As you can see, we have a special guest. I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. For those following along on the podcast only, we are hopefully putting this up available for video as well on the Cider Crate YouTube channel, so you can go ahead and check that out if you'd like to follow along there. This is our slow sipper series, so we're going to get a little more in depth into some of the questions with a cider producer. And well, why don't I let you introduce yourself, Richard, and where you're from?
Sure. My name is Richard Liu, and I'm the owner of Ironwood Cider in Niagara Lake. Been doing this since 2013. Happy to be here.
Oh, thanks so much for joining us as we've chatted. I think we've chatted in the past. I'd have to double check. At some point, we probably crossed over, and I know I visited your new facility that you've just gotten opened up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Ironwood and how it all got started?
Sure. As you alluded to, we're just about to launch our new cider house in Niagara Lake. It's on the farm, on the same farm, on the same facility. It's about 10,000 square foot expansion, so it's quite a bit of projects. Kind of a little bit about the history, but I purchased this fruit winery business in 2013, about 8 years ago, and got into the cider space maybe a year later. It was actually part of the portfolio that we had, but to be honest, it wasn't really something that we really looked into until a year after, just because of my for lack of better terms, but my lack of understanding of the industry at the time. Well, I thought I knew a little bit, but once you get into it, you're like, no, there's a lot to learn. We kind of really delved into the Ironwood Cider brand. In 2014, we got listed, I believe, in 2015, and the rest is sort of the history. And we're happy where the craft cider is. Obviously, we can do a lot better, but in general, I would say that it's been a very rewarding journey since I kind of got into that cider train, I guess.
So, was there a specific sort of moment or reason why you decided, well, maybe the cider was an area that you needed to focus on?
Um, I mean, so okay. The place was called, and still is called, Sunnybrook. Sunnybrook Farm Estate Winery was sort of the precursor of the operation here. It specializes in fruit wine, which is obviously anything that's other than grapes, essentially. And we were doing, I would say the focus definitely at the very start was sort of on the more of the fruit wine base. But eventually, what cider draws me in was the fact that number one, it's a refreshment category. You can probably do a lot more from a branding standpoint. So that draws me in for sure. Number two was, I started really getting to the sort of the apple history of Ontario. And then the more I learned about sort of the history that apples has in Ontario, Canada, the more I like it. I have eaten apples since I was a baby, so it's not really it's one of the most well-known fruits out there. But it just the rich history that the Ontario has with growing apples, and just how this cider thing really connects with the local agriculture really draws me in. I would say some of the fruits that we're growing. So we also have pears, peaches, berry, and obviously berry fruits like blueberry, cranberry. Really, the one thing that Ontario grows the best of all the fruits that we work with is apple. And so when once I started to get a better understanding of where Ontario is as far as fruit growing goes, it's a no-brainer to really narrow down into cider, which obviously is apple juice fermented, and kind of go from there.
Well, it sounds like the mystique and the interest around the apple is what really got you moving forward from your starting point to where you're at now.
Right.
Has there been a large change in the industry since when you got started to now? And if so, what have you sort of experienced in that
Oh, big
process?
time. Big time. So I think I joined. So yeah. So when I first joined you sort of like start to think and do more about on the cider side. I got I started meeting a bunch of great folks. That was probably late 2013, early 2014. And things was really different back in those days. I think there were probably less than 10 cider producers in the province. And the first person I got to meet, I believe, was Nick Sutcliffe from Pommies. And very quickly, I started to know more people in the industry. Obviously, that includes the late Grant Halls and Chris Hallworth from West Ave, Brock Podcombe, and the two Mikes, and Mike and Mark at Twin Pines, and all those guys, and obviously Tom Wilson. So it was a very close knit group at that time, and obviously since then last 7 years, there was an explosion of craft cider in Ontario, and it's now I believe we have you have this number better than I do, but I'm pretty sure we have more than 100 craft cider producers in Ontario. So that's a big change from less than 10, or say 10 to 20, to 100. So that's a pretty amazing growth for sure.
Is the camaraderie still like it was back then? Is there still people reaching out asking for help or offering help, or has it become a little bit more of an industry and a little less of some friends coming together and doing something new and groundbreaking?
Right. I would say the dynamics is obviously different, and I'm sure there's still a lot of camaraderie in terms of people willing to helping out others and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of the same, I guess. Similar to the wine industry or the beer industry or the spirits. Anytime there's a explosion of growth, it's there's going to be people with different opinions on how things should go, and it just kind of just the way it works, right? But for the most part, I would say it's still a very close knit group, and at the end of the day, everyone just wants to see this category growing the best it could and be the best place it could be.
And as you said, over 100 cider producers now in Ontario, a large growth. When we got into this in 2015, we estimated there's around 45 or 50, and so double in the last 5 years. And that's pretty normal now across Canada, looking at close to 370 producers, with one or two new coming online each week. Is there something in the industry that surprises you, that before you got into it, or even now that you've learned a little bit more about it, that you're sort of surprised happens?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, it is it is a true Ontario industry the way I look at it. Just because, like I said, Apple has Apple is basically, the way I see it, Apple is Ontario crop. That's what Ontario is known for, is Apple. So it's not surprising to see a lot of interest in what I would consider the crop of Ontario, the fruit crop of Ontario. So that, having that being said, though, it is a newer category. It's not wine or beer. Cider still, I would say, for the most part, has a stigma. in the mainstream's eyes in terms of what they think cider is. And then, I mean, you're probably the same as me, where you'll be like, no, that's not what the cider you're referring to is not really what I'm referring to.
Hmm.
And you still see that on a daily basis. I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely not. It's from a category standpoint, it is a lot less known than the other. So with that being said, it is surprising to see how many people are jumping on board, hoping to offer artisanal, locally made craft ciders to the markets. But at the end of the day, like honestly, like that's how the craft beer got their growth, is being able to have these craft offering at every small village or townships of Ontario. And that's really why they have such a good growth, is because they're really, you have to start at the grassroots level. The way I look at it is when you're trying to build a local industry, the best way to do it is from the bottom up. And that's what craft cider is doing with all these growth from small town. And a lot of those are small town producers, which I think is really good for the industry.
Yeah, great for local community, great for the apple growers, for the other fruit growers, and for taxation and what keeps the roads paved and everything like that as well. Plus,
Yeah.
Ontario makes an incredible product, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that, having a chance to have sampled close to 1,000 ciders, most of them Ontario based, there's a little bit inside that says, we should be larger and growing and bigger than what we are, and get more of that representation because of, again, the product and the variety that's available. You were there at the beginning, sort of, and as a role at the chair for the Ontario Craft Cider Association. Could you tell us how it was like when you got involved, and what were some of those big challenges that were sort of
Right.
starting up that process? And maybe, I know there's a little bit of some of those big wins that you've had along the way as well, that'd be nice to share with us.
Sure. So I don't really want to pat myself on my back, to be honest. I mean, it's always a group effort. So I joined OCCA, Ontario Craft Cider Association, the moment, I believe in 2014. So basically joined right away, and that's kind of how I got introduced to kind of the OGs, I would call them, of the industry. And I believe Nick was the chair, and then at the time, and then it was passed down to Tom, and they did some really great works with, in terms of helping the craft cider to be more recognized, both in the marketplace and obviously most important in the government's eyes. Those are so I took over the chairman position in 2018 and 2019. Those were the 2 years I was the chair. And I would say the one thing that I would say I'm pretty proud is to kind of give it some of the marketing supports, because I've always come from the belief that you can do all your talks with the government, it's all good, but at the end of the day, it has to make sense from a market standpoint. And so I think the first thing, and it was actually pretty much a coincidence, but it was maybe I was like maybe 2 weeks in after the AGM. There was a event with George Solius, who's the CEO of LCBO, as everyone probably know. So I walked to him. I introduced myself. I told him that hey, I'm Richard. I'm from OCCA. I'm a cider producer. How can we get support from the LCBO? And George was pretty he was pretty friendly, and passed and immediately passed this file to his associates. And that's kind of how we started talking to Chris Robertson, who was the director of Beer and Cider, and we started having regular meetings with the LCBO. And I think it was probably 6 or 12 months after, then we got our own Ontario Craft Cider shelves in the LCBO. So I think that was a good start, great start. Obviously, I would love to get what the VQA and the craft beer guys get. I think we're still fighting that battle. because it does take time. And obviously, if you want to grow the category, you have to work with the only retail operator in the province, which is LCPO. And those are kind of so that's the one thing that I would say that that I'm pretty proud of. And we also did some kind of the events and sort of the new stuff. So that's kind of all happened under my tenure. Um, I wish I could do more on the government, on the GR side of things. And obviously, we were really involved with regard to the reform. I mean, the first year, I was actually, I think the change of the party happened on my first year. So when I took over, it was still a liberal government. But I think it was maybe 6 months after, then it changed into a PC government. And obviously, without going into too much details, but they, obviously everyone knows there was a really quick change in the finance file. So when their first guy was Fideli, and he didn't, things didn't work out, and then and quickly the file got shuffled. And so you have to basically, every time there's a change of personnel, you have to start from ground zero, sort of thing. So that was a difficult process for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, it's something that we're still fighting on, and hopefully we'll we'll get what we want to get, sooner or later. So those are kind of the things that I would say happened in a nutshell.
And I think a lot of that led towards some other big changes in the sector. We're now seeing it available at grocery stores as well, which is a huge outlet opportunity for some producers. Obviously, with COVID-19, we've seen some challenges when it comes to distribution. Pretty much bar sales, stopped for many spaces, and there had to be a pivot at that local level. And we've seen the 5-acre rule both be put on hold, as well as the ability for product to be purchased in-house at restaurants and bars. So there's been some big changes about that. Do you see things moving forward in progression that's going to make it easier for producers and distributors to get their product outside of their local little market there and grow? Or do you still see that there's some major challenges, both economically and socially, for this to continue to grow at the pace that it has in the past?
I mean, the grocery is definitely a big one. They obviously has a very different system than the way LCPO merchandise their beverage, alcohol products. Everyone has kind of what they, their own wish list, and that obviously includes the grocery operators. I would say at this time, the craft guys are obviously trying to get all the supports they can in this very competitive, it's a competitive category or industry. I mean, it's extremely competitive. But at the end of the day, if the market wants it, it'll have a fighting chance. And that's really, it's always been my motto, is that you have to really convince the market, which is the buying consumers. They need to genuinely like the products. And if they like the product enough, they will seek you out, whether it's online deliveries, which is obviously really big, these days, or requesting from their local bars or restaurants, which is, I would say, still very much a market-driven, economical activity. So those are the things. I would just say that the more people they know and learn more about cider, they should, there's a good chance that they might like it and decide that this is their go-to. And the more we do this, the bigger the pie is. It's not beer or wine, whereas I would say, those are fairly well received, generally understood products categories. You know what you're getting basically when you say, hey, I would like the bottle of, say, a cab. That's, you know what you're getting. But with cider, I would say there's still a lot of education that needs to be done. And once people know more about what this product is, the market, the pie can only be bigger. I think that's what the industry is hoping for, is that one day we can reach to the critical mass. And there's really two things at it. There's one is the general accepted view of the category as a whole, and the other is obviously sort of a small versus big. So as a small guys, there is an existing cider market about let's say 100%. We're about 20% right now. So how can we go from 20 to 40 to 60 in this growing pie? Like, I think that's kind of what everyone's question is how can we make that happen? And in what ways can we do to expedite that process? And obviously we can go on forever on that, but at the end of the day, I do think that there's still a lot of growth potential in cider, and I'm sure that's why everyone's still kind of like grinding it, and to this day, to see how that would work in that next few years time frame.
You're a Asian Canadian cider producer. There's not many in the Ontario industry that have the diverse background of color or minority. It's a pretty welcoming and friendly community. Have you experienced that? Have you experienced discrimination in the industry as well?
To be honest, no. And I think I can say that fairly confidently, or else, I wouldn't be at the place I'm in today. It's, to answer your, the last question, yeah, no, I haven't really received any sort of backlash. I am probably I'm pretty sure I'm the only one, only Asian in my industry. And I'm really proud of that, to be for sure. But at the end of the day, I think as long as you're doing what you're doing is helping everyone, or sort of like everyone's working towards a common goal, I don't really see how that would be an issue. So it's great, and that's that's definitely the one thing that I would say kind of push our kind of our mindsets to our new branding with regard to Ironwood, is to really showcase how inclusive Canada is. I tell people, like, probably mostly outside of Ontario, or just people from, because obviously it's there's a lot of people with different backgrounds in our community. And so one day I will see an Indian Canadian, one day, the other day I probably will see a Mexican, or or European, or whatever. And we'll talk, we'll start chatting about things that they do, I do, and eventually they, most people will be like, yeah, like that's pretty cool that that Canada is so inclusive and so welcoming of people of different cultures and colors and stuff like that. And I think that my view on this is to try to focus a little bit more on the positives. I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about the negatives. There's definitely a lot of things that we can be better on. But I think having that success story and some of the feel good stories is also very critical to kind of make sure that we're heading the right direction too. So that's kind of sort of my experience with it.
With obviously there was a decent amount of backlash around Asians with COVID-19. Do you have any comments around that, or do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't seen it myself. I obviously I see a lot on the medias, and that's that's what media do. Their job is to broadcast information that they think their viewerships want to see. I'm not saying that there's it doesn't exist. For sure it does. But yeah, not like personally, and honestly, like I'm whether it's BOM or this, the latest thing. Like it's just, everyone wants to feel safe, and in the environment that they live in. I think that's universal. And whether you're talking about the females or the LGBT, obviously there's a lot of social movements, and at the end of the day, people just want to be respected for who they are and what they believe in. And I personally, I was born in Taiwan, so I'm Taiwanese Canadian, and Taiwan is the first country in Asia to legalize gay marriage. And so it's a very progressive. I would say it's probably the most progressive Asian country. And so that's the values that I come with. I can't speak for other countries in terms of why they believe in or what their governments believe in, but because of how new Taiwan is as a country, like I think that there's a lot of values that we share in terms of in Canada, and that's why it's very easy for me to be aligned with sort of the values that you were referring to, and I hold those values dearly, for sure.
Do you have any advice to someone who has a non-white Caucasian male background coming into the cider industry, if they're looking to get involved, or in general anybody that's looking to start up? What would you say is
anyone should do what they believe they can do. That's always been my core belief. And obviously there's both business and personal reasons in terms of what the things I'm doing right now. But I just think that and definitely there are times where I was talking to people and people were like, "Oh, that's cool," and it's great that you're doing this. I think that if the world has more people doing what they truly are passionate in and what they truly believe in, the world will be a better place, 100%. Because it allows people to be really to do whatever they want to do without any sort of I won't say repercussions, but just sort of a restrictions. I mean, it's 2021. I mean, we come a long way, and it's the world's a bit just it's just a better place when everyone is showing respect and interacting with other people. Doesn't matter what they come from. Like you can agree to disagree. I'm not saying that you have to agree with their opinions, but you have to respect with their opinions and where they're coming from, because everyone has their own stories, everyone has their own value systems. I'm not going to get into religions because that's you can't win from that. But it's just something that I give you space. We respect each other. We might say differently on these issues, but we'll see the same. It's like the biggest the one thing that I would say is it's similar to beverage industry is sports. Like we can be very different, but we're both Maple Leafs fan. Then we have a common goal, and everyone just wants the Leafs to get far in the playoffs and hopefully win the cup. And those are kind of the things that I think the world needs more, because like I said, it's just a better place. When people are friendlies and they're just like, hey, that's fine, but we can still be good friends. And I think that's really what matters at the end of the day.
And even if you're a Boston fan, I'm sure you'll get along as well, right? Same ideas, and hopefully that's something that we're going to see coming out of this pandemic, that there are going to be those more positive changes, both socially, economically, environmentally is another huge thing, that we're at this sort of precipice of an opportunity for us going forward, as well as we could be going over the edge of a cliff and not getting any further along.
Right.
So
I mean, it's definitely, no, for sure. Yep. Environmental might be, it's with the farming community, it's a touchy subject for sure, 100%.
So do you see anywhere where the cider industry is either looking to go or where you would like to see the cider industry moving towards?
Okay, so my big thing always, and one of the biggest reason why I'm still doing what I'm doing today is that I really truly believe that we have a really good shot to make cider, you know, Canadian. As in when I say that, I mean internationally. When people think about what Canada does really well I'm hoping that one day will be cider. I mean, obviously, ice wine sort of and Canadian whiskey. There are some of the things that we've done well on. I personally think craft cider could be another one. But for us to get there, we need to number one, we need to have a sort of dominant position in our local marketplace. We have the highest market share of all the beverage alcohol categories as far as cider goes, and so obviously we did it with very limited resource. Um, it's something that I do feel that if anyone were to have a dominant position, when I mean dominant position, I mean over 50%. When you look at the some of the North American jurisdictions, usually when you're over 50%, that category kind of you can kind of say that's your thing. That's something that you do really well on, and that's accepted by the marketplace. It's not just a bunch of producers, pounding their chest and be like, "Hey, we're the best." No, the market actually thinks that you are the best, and that's really what it comes down to. It and because of our rich history with growing apples. And obviously, I would say the market, for the long time, it's very big, big brand driven. But there is a chance, there is a good chance that the craft cider, just because of how much education we still need to do when it comes to cider. That's why I think that there's a better chance for a cider to become the dominant. So yeah, coming back to your question, like I would say that's the number one thing I want to see is for craft cider to cross that 50% market share. I don't know when that's going to happen. Hopefully sooner. But yeah, that's so when people think about cider, it's not Strongbow or Somersby. It's Ontario Craft Cider. And I think that's just that I would love to see that hopefully very soon. So that's sort of my big goal.
Before we get to some of what Ironwood's doing down the future and what you're excited about,
Okay.
I'd love you to just quickly name a couple of your favorite products and some of the people in the industry that you really like or enjoy.
Wow. So I have to be really careful with this. I have I would say like my palate is probably like I want to call it advanced, but it's I have more of an acquired taste when it comes to tasting ciders that I feel is very unique and has a distinguished flavor. And to that, I would say Spirit Tree and West Ave. They make their ciders. I do think that there are some unique flavors that I can really distinguish. I'll be like, yep, this is from that producer, and that's something that it takes a lot of work to get there. And so those, I would say those are probably the two producers that I like the most from a uniqueness standpoint. So those would be I would say would be my two sort of favorite cider producers for sure.
Pretty established producers, traditional methods, but also willing to try something a little bit more unique, their own. Both have gorgeous places. I mean, full disclosure, we are getting married, Bethany and I, in October at West Ave. So they offer all of those types of experiences as well. Quite a bit like what you're doing. You have a new place opening up. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what that plan is. And
Right.
if I recall correctly, the view over the back orchard is quite gorgeous as well.
Right. So it's a modern building. And so essentially, we want to, when we build it, we wanted to make a statement. I mean, you have to, because Niagara Lake is very competitive when it comes to tourism, retail tourism. And so we knew that we had to bring our best shots. Obviously, it's not exactly a chateau. It's it's not what it is. But it's a modern farmhouse building. We're gonna have a lot of different ciders. Moving to a new building allows us to really get into different cider styles that I've been wanting to do for a while. I mean, we do see some seasonals that we sell to licensees and pour at markets and obviously our own retail store. But kind of having a more robust, comprehensive ways of doing things is gonna definitely help people to learn more about what cider can be. So kind of going back to sort of the extending question. So when people come to our place, we're gonna be like, doesn't matter what your knowledge level is with cider, we're gonna have a product that you're gonna be happy, you're gonna find interesting about, you're gonna be curious about. So to that effect, we basically decided that we're gonna be focusing our cider productions on three major streams, and those threes are so we call modern, which is more of a mainstream tasting cider. Um, something that's a little bit easy to put together and has a more of a consumer friendly flavors. And then number two would be artisanal. So that's more of a geeky kind of craft beer way of doing things. But essentially, it's using still I would say culinary normal apple juice, but doing different things to it so that way it tastes a little bit different. Whether it's skin contact or barrel aging or all kinds of a more of a artisanal way of adding flavor into the products. And then lastly, we have this thing called what I call it vintage, which is it's every production is vintage because we do it during harvest, and that's it. Like we only make one batch. That's what vintage really means. And these are specialty apples that we procure from nearby orchards, whether it's European varietals or British varietals, or some of the more well known and really good varietals like Spy or Russet. Those are like we don't do much to it. So basically, these are ambient fermentation, very aged in neutral barrels. It's something we want to reflect what that vintage looks like. So that's why we call it vintage. So that's probably more of a wine way of doing things, because then you can really taste the tannin of these different exotic apples, because that's the biggest difference between a culinary apple and a cider apple is that cider apples has a lot more acid and has a lot more tannin. And sort of like, how do you showcase those unique characters of apples? That's something that's sort of what I wanted to do with those products. So with that being said, it's like I'm pretty happy. That's sort of the direction we want to take with regard to focusing those three streams. And so that way, when people come in, hopefully I have something that everyone is interested, and sort of cater to them. So, and I personally I would say I'm pretty excited about all three of them as well. I mean, I'm not exactly a super snob where I was like, nope, I only want to drink this type or that type. I think that I'm pretty depending. It really depends on location too, right? What the occasion is, and you sort of drink what would go best with that sort of experience that you want to get. So so when people come to Ironwood, hopefully, whenever that is, with the given with the current restrictions, I hope people will be walking away with a new appreciation about cider and apples. So yeah.
Sounds like a really great learning facility and place, as you said, to 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 share that information with the consumer that they probably didn't know. And I agree with you. I mean, I started into everything with, oh, here's a new Summersby flavor. Here, what's Strongbow? What's Magners? And then you find your way into something. And I think Ironwood was one of the first ones I remember having. I think County was one of the first ones that ever sort of said, wait a minute, we can do this. And then there's a lot of other people that have gone and said, yes, obviously Ontario can do this and create this really neat product. Do you have anything
Right.
exciting that's coming up that you want to share with us?
I mean, so from a product standpoint, I mean, obviously we've been working on those products for a while. I think the first vintage we made was 2 years ago, so we will be releasing those products. I think in the next 3 or 4 months. Product aside, what I'm really excited about is our new brand, the new rebranding, which it took a while to get there, and honestly, it was I wouldn't call it a painful process, but it took a lot of soul searching in terms of what I really think would be very at the same time very, very meaningful to me, and also hopefully has some sort of interest from the marketplace. But going back to what we're discussing earlier about inclusiveness, the new brand was sort of want to be the frontier of that ideology, in terms of really embracing the diversity and the inclusiveness in our community. So to that effect, we as far with our new branding, we decided that we're going to be featuring local artists on our labels for throughout the entire lines. I mean, obviously, there are other producers who's taken a similar approach on that end, but the way we do it is that we want to be very focused. So we only work with 4 to 6 local artists a year, and essentially the way that we select these local artists is that they have to reflect the makeup of our communities. So this year, the artists that we're working with are there's a Indian guy from Hamilton, and then we have a Jamaican girl, a Hong Kong guy from Toronto, an Indigenous guy from Northern Ontario, and also a local white female in Niagara, and then also this very Italian influence women as well. So it gives me a lot of inspiration in terms of what we can do. So the one thing that we are working on, and hopefully, hopefully we'll still be the first one to launch that product. Is So usually when we work with the artists, I would try to not instant interview, but just have a chat with them, just kind of learn a little bit more about them, because we're featuring their artwork also in our space year round, and we're sort of like a partners, right? It's not just like a one-off, hey, I get your art, great, see you later sort of thing. No, like it's we're building relationships with them and their culture, and so I want to know more about their culture. And when I was talking to Camille, which is the Jamaican female artist that we're working with, I asked them like, what would you say is a very unique, distinguished Jamaican flavor? And she didn't hesitate. She said sorrel, which is a hibiscus drink from Jamaica, and that everyone drinks apparently there. And I didn't know this before. I was like, oh, okay, what's that? So then she started talking to me, explaining me a little bit more. We obviously have quite a bit of Jamaican workers here in Niagara Lake, and so I was just like, okay, so is this a thing that you guys really like? And they're just everyone just like yes, and you're supposed to add alcohol in there too when you drink it. So I was just like, so that was just like, then we need to make something like that too, and then put the their artworks on it, so that way it's yours. And I think from a synergy standpoint, I honestly think there's nothing more Canadian than that. We're using a Canadian, locally grown apples as the base. We're infusing different flavors from the different cultures that we find in our communities, and it's there's nothing more Canadian than that. That's the way I see it. Whether it's a Irish inspired cider or Italian inspired cider, there's nothing more Canadian than that because everyone's kind of got their own unique flavors that they enjoy. And for us to kind of take that position and sort of like, hey, like and just kind of stay open minded and sort of as opposed to trying to read up the drinks kind of like the 2020 21 trends, flavor trends of the year. I would say like I personally actually would rather do more like these are the flavors that really signifies represent that culture. We want to do it, and obviously want to do it well, and hopefully that way when we do it and we could become more of an influencing brand, we can allow more people to know about other cultures. So that way, it wouldn't, people like me wouldn't be so ignorant because I would have known already that it's a really popular Jamaican drink because I tried it from Ironwood and they say this, it's a popular, flavor from Jamaica. So those are the things that get me, super excited and sort of like giving me like a really renewed, enthusiasm. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like it's a very grinding industry. So a lot of time you can fit, there's a lot of, challenges that could be hard to overcome. But once I figured this new thing out and decided that this, we're definitely putting this into our DNA, um, I honestly, I feel like 100 times better because not only does it hopefully align with the business objectives of the operation, but it super aligns with my personal value, and there's no better feeling than that. So yeah, so those are that's sort of the exciting thing that I hopefully over the next year or two or a few years, we can do some really cool products and get some really feedback from the communities that we're working with on that, and sort of take it from there.
Well, I'm excited to see what you have coming forward. I know your new cider maker joined about 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago or so, and was
Right.
really interested in, I got to sample a little bit of what you had on the way and heard a little bit of what were in some of the barrels back then, and really exciting going
Right.
forward. Where do people get more information and contact for what you're offering? Do you have a website and all that, I'm
Yeah, I
assuming?
mean, that's the way is to our. Yeah, so we've been a little bit behind on marketing end, just because we really stripped down to the bones with the everything that's happening with the COVID. But in the process of putting, a team together, and the best way to learn is definitely social or email, newsletters. Something that we want to do more on for sure. So I'd say, yeah, IG is probably the best bet. And hopefully, yeah, I mean, we're going to be, I think we had a goal of releasing over 50 products earlier this year, in terms of what we're hoping to do this year. I think that's maybe sound a little bit too aggressive with what's going on this year because of the pandemic. But yeah, I mean, it's we're definitely shooting for hopefully one new flavor per week sort of frequency eventually, and and with the new concept that we have, like the sky's the limits. Once I started to tackle into these different flavors from different communities, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of flavors to venture into, and and like I said, we're not really just looking at the sales leaders from different markets, what most guys would do when they're trying to like figure out what their new flavor is going to be. No, we go straight to the source. We go to a neighborhood, we talk to different people, and we're like, so what are you feeling like, what's your go-to, and I personally think that's the best way to go about things. And because cider is so new and there's not really any sort of a preconceived that you have to be. Obviously, we're still gonna have like apple flavors. I don't know, like just straight ciders. But from a flavor standpoint, um, that gives us a lot of versatility in when it comes to new flavors. And we still have our artisanal things where we're doing a little bit more geeky stuff. Whether we're using foraged um, um, you know botanicals or stuff like that, which is pretty big nowadays. So we're still doing that. It's just that I mean, it just I'm just personally I'm very intrigued by the potential of going into neighborhoods and really trying to get to the bottom of what are the sort of the unique flavors that what maybe it could be polish. I don't know, like it's just there's a lot of there's a lot of different flavors out there. We just want to go in and figure out. We can flavor together in a modern way, through blending, or we can put the flavor together in an artisanal way. Depending on what the product is, where we see, where we see the product goes. Um, it's very versatile. I mean, the only thing is probably vintage is a little bit like, it's very cookie cutter. We have to do things a certain way. But the modern and the artisanal are like, you can do whatever you want, as long as it tastes good, as a unique proposition. Um, Hopefully, people will get excited from that. So, yeah.
Well, Richard, I'm excited for what you have coming forward. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about Ironwood and some of your background and your history, and hopefully where we see the future going. So really appreciate it again today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you so much.